Hey, welcome back, guys. Today, we're going to go back into the Dune series. I'm going to go to the entryway, finish that up, work on the ornamental handle. I think the next video, I'm just going to jump forward a bit, and we're going to start working on the rest of the room so we can, bring this a little bit further along. Okay. So here you see the finished doorknob here, and now let's break down how we actually made this thing. So first, I'm just going to turn everything off. So what I started out with was, pretty sure it was bronze armor. Let me just pull that in. I'm just going to make a folder for everything I'd already done. So just go select it all, put it in there. Original, let's see, I'll just call this finished. Turn that off. Okay. So we're just going to look at this doorknob first. This little section here. First thing you want to do when you first start is just turn everything off. If you're using some base layer, blocking the biggest things first, then refine as you go. Something like that. All right. I'm just going to turn height off. Turn off normal. I want to have metallic on because without metallic it looks like this. Turn metallic on and I'll turn it all the way on. Let's mess with the roughness a bit. So a value of 0 will be infinitely shiny. Value of 1 will be infinitely rough. So this is a pretty rough handle, but I always want to start with something that's a little bit shinier, like when it was first created. So that's the idea behind here. When it was first created, it's going to be pretty sharp ding. Then let's see what this first fill that they have in here. So it looks like they put a grunge map in there. You can see there. Let's look at the roughness channel. That's all it's doing. So those black areas, it's going to get shinier. Go to roughness. Set to darken. I'll turn that all the way up. Then we'll go to final rough. This is using a moisture noise in the roughness channel. They're using it in the normal channel as well. So this is driving normal and roughness. So you can either go with that or not. Let's leave that for now. Let's turn up the scale a bit. Brush intensity. All right, so what one of the things I'm going to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a layer. I'm going to make a levels here. I'm going to go to normal and I'm just going to crank down this intensity. I think it's a little bit too much. I'm not sure that I can even. No. You know what? Most of the normal information that I'm going to be adding in there is going to be driven by height. And then it's going to do a height to normal conversion at the end. So, okay. All right, let's go to dirt, see what's going on here. This is way too crazy. I'm just going to Alt and left click into that mask to bring it up. Go into the mask generator here, mask editor. The way these generators work is there's texture layers, there's ambient occlusion layers, curvature layers, world space normal. Basically, it's grabbing all those mesh maps that we baked out in the beginning and it's doing different things. So these first two slots, texture and texture 2, these are just two textures that are blending over top of each other in different ways. Like this one's doing a linear add. This is texture 1. And this texture 1 down here, as you can see, and you can change this input, is using dirt 1. So this is its histogram scan. You can change its contrast and its disorder. You could also put in custom things that you made in Designer in here as well. Then the texture secondary is just this grunge rust fine, as you can see. And you just change the balancing here. So down here, you can see that it's using the world space normals, position, gradient, thickness, curvature, and ambient occlusion for this. Micro normal and micro height, we're not going to go over for this, but that's a way to add in extra details that is driven by other channels. All right, so for the scale, let's mess around with that and see what's going on there. All right, so this looks like it's kind of a speckled dots look. Looks like texture 2 is doing that, the main cutting into there. This is a subtraction. You multiply. Sometimes I'm messing in here too much. I need to go back and see what the actual real result is. All right, and then this global balance is going to be balancing the entire signal. All right, so let's actually see what this dirt is. So we can see the roughness set to linear dodge and 50%. Let's see what the color is, 75%. And it's just set to black. Okay, so I'm just going to bring this up a little bit. All right. So then let's look at surface details. All right, so the scale is way off. So we want to definitely increase the scale there. So I'm just going to left click, Alt, left click on that stack again to look at its mask editor. Let's go down to its texture. Let's see which one it is. All right, so it's the first one. So there's two ways that you can scrub a slider. So you can just grab the slider and just, slide it back and forth and it'll follow directly, or you hold down Shift and it'll slow it down by like a factor of 10. I use that a lot. That way that I can have finer control over the speed at which the sliders slide. Okay, go over the texture 2, see what that is. Oh, it's like little speckles. You can just go down here and see what that's called. Gaussian spots. Okay, you can see here, this is the intensity. So this is just a 0-1 split. The texture 2 is just normal blend. So if I did like a linear, here we go. Say you do have a single channel that you want to just take down, just go here. And I definitely want to use Shift for this and just take it down a hair. Let's bring down the roughness value too. All right, then we'll do edges damage. And right away, I'm just going to kill this height. All right, let's look at this mask editor. Okay, so it looks like the thing that's driving this the most is right now is the curvature. So I'll go down to this tab. Let's take a look at this. I'm just going to blur it a little bit to find out what that is. Oh, first texture is nothing. Just set that to normal. Okay. Texture 2, what is that? Grunge map 9. So that's the one that will drive something. Let's mess around with that. Grunge map 9. Set to subtract. Let's try something else. So we can swap out anything we want at any time. So let's try this black and white spots. See what we can get with that. Put that in there. Oh, you know what? This global blur. I see. So that blur is actually blurring the map too. I never thought about that. And for curvature, let's do, what do I want to do with that? Lighten? No. Okay, we basically did nothing. Cool. All right, moving on. So sharpen, it looks like that's just like taking all the details and sharpening a little bit. So I'm just going to turn this off. Let's go back to the one that I was making, see where we ended up there. Okay, so this is the base that I did. Doorknob base, the first thing I want to do is add this pattern. So the way that I did that, let's turn everything off. So this first layer that I made, I just make the fill, and what I do is I mask the fill. If I took this black and white spots and I dragged it directly onto this material like this, what it's going to do is it's going to go in and out at the same time. And that's possible what you want. But the thing is, you can also control each of those channels separately, which is what I like to do. I feel like you just have more control if you do it this way. So I turn that off. So I have height just as a flat value, 0 or 1. I'm going to make a fill. And I'll take that black and white spots and put it into grayscale. Now I'm moving only one direction up or down. Now the problem, one of the problems that arises here is that you are only pushing it up in one direction. And I do know that that is the case. However, there's a way around that to get the control of this method, but also the look of the first method of them going in and out at the same time. What you need to do is you need to use this signal, invert it, and push the height in the opposite direction. So right now, anything that's white is the only thing that's affecting the height. Any value that is black, nothing will change. The other way that we were doing it is this black and white signal was making things go in and out at equal distance. So anything that was black, it was going in. Anything that was white was going out. So now only white values from this mask is going to go in or out. What we can do, we can just duplicate that and could add an anchor. So we could do like test height anchor. Perfect. I'm going to make a black mask to wipe that one out. Add a fill. Let's add the test height anchor. Then I'm going to just invert it. So now it's inverting exactly that same signal. So now this value is going in, this value is going out. That way you can have more control over what the in and out values are going to be. So this will be more, I'm just going to go over here and turn tessellation up. So let's enable, under our shader settings, enable displacement tessellation or height. And I'm just going to turn it up to a value of 2. I'm going to crank my subdivision count to 32. Move this off screen. Okay. So now as I move this value up, see it's actually lifting off the surface. I turn this value up. So now this is at 0, it's going nowhere. Now it's going to go in. Pretty crunchy. So we don't need to do that for now. It was just an example. So anyway, so for this pattern, going back to this idea. Okay, so we have our inner pattern here and the signal looks like this. You turn everything off. So first I'm just using this fabric circles. So do fabric circles using this one, which is just some random shape that comes with the Substance library. Looks great. So it gives me like this look, good start. If I crank that, see that's coming out. So any of the white values is going to be going out. Any of the black values are going to be staying at 0. And that's the opposite. Okay, so the first thing I did is I blurred it just so that it wasn't perfectly sharp. Then I re-leveled it. You see the difference? Just changing that fall off a little bit. Then I used this sharpen, which almost did nothing. Honestly, it's probably better just like that. You know, sometimes I'm just working and I'm just, doing whatever. Let's just turn that sharpen off. Okay. All right. And then I have this inner pattern mask because I want to be able to redrive that later. Mask looks like this. Let's turn this way down. Just a little bit of relief. Okay. Then this layer, the grunge nest. So let's turn this layer off completely right now and see what this is doing. All right, so this is just like a dirt, just a simple fill layer. And I just have color, height, roughness, and metal. So I'm just using like a brown color. I turned off the metalness to 0 so that it's not, because it's like a dirt or a grunge or something, so it's not metallic. That way it has a white highlight instead of a colored highlight. Modified the height a little bit, and I made it more rough than the doorknob base metal. Perfect. Go and look and see what the signal is. So I'm just using a black and white spots and just leveled it so that I can even probably mess this a little bit. It looks like honestly, I think I want to be pushing this out, not in. Yes. That makes more sense because the dirt would be collecting, not eroding. I guess it kind of depends. Okay, just mess with this a little bit. All right, so we have that dirt. And now with this grunge nest, basically that's just a folder that I stuck this fill into. So I just went whomp and put that in there. And why I do that is if I'm happy with the way the signal is looking like this, but I want to be able to just mask it out completely by a new layer stack instead of having to try to like mix it into the other one, I'll just folder something. And you can stack folders on folders on folders if you have really complicated setups. Sometimes a good way to get around this is just by using anchors, but I tend to use both. Okay, so here we go. So let's see what this grunge nest is doing. Just turn off that mask. So what I'm doing is I'm grabbing the anchor, this inner pattern mask from this inner pattern mask from here, and blurred it subtly, redrove the height, and then I multiplied this clouds too. You can see what that's doing is it's just masking the inner parts of this guy. Now that I see what it's doing, I'm just gonna redrive this a little bit. It's just way too much height information. So I'm really gonna turn that down. So it's almost nothing. All right. I'm just gonna take the black value down and the white value down. Maybe even turn up the metallic a little bit. All right. Just the scale a little bit. I'm just gonna take that balance down. See, this is a good reason why you should sometimes look at your mask to see what's happening. So now I can tell like those white areas is where it's gonna be on, the black areas is where it's gonna be off. Sometimes it's better to do it that way because you can see what's kind of happening a little bit better. Okay, so I'm getting a little noodly, so let's move on. Now what I need to do is I need to mask that to just be in the inner part of this doorknob. So what I did here is I nested this again in this pattern 1. So let's look at that. You can see all I did was I made a paint layer, and I'm back on, made this paint layer, and I masked it by, I think it was UV shape. So I'll just go up here, 3D and UV. Yeah, I did it by UV shell. So there's 4 different types here. There's UV shell, there's mask by mesh name, mask by a quad, or mask by triangle. So I think I just masked by shell. So you can hit X to go from 0 to 1, turn that guy on. And now if I hit M, we'll actually see what's happening. You can see it's masking on, off. So now it's just inside there, and it's just showing you the wireframe. If you go over into your display settings, say you are using this and it's like really distracting, you can change the color of this to be black so you don't see it as much. Or you can just turn it off entirely by going to wireframe opacity and just, so you can turn it up or down, your preference. I'll just use it as black for now. Then as soon as I click on another folder or I change my tool, then that wireframe will go away. Okay, cool. So that's what we have for that centerpiece there. And so I don't know really what's going on in there, but that's just kind of where I landed for this little shape inside that handle. Okay, perfect. Go to pattern 2. Same thing I did. I masked the outer portion of that, and I had to do a little hand painting to get the signal that I needed. Okay, so here we are on this layer. So the first thing is this inner pattern. So we'll just turn that on and take a look at this stack. A little complicated here. But first thing that I did was I did this fabric circles. This is a handy thing here. Actually, I just type in circles so you can see there's a couple different types. Circles, dots, lines, and these are like really dynamic too. Split, rounded, border. There's some other things you can use. Pretty cool. So let's take a look at the circle split, which is I think the one I used. Actually, no, I used stick. Oh, let's do circular. Sorry, circular. There we go. We have dots circular and dots stick, dots triangle, dots circular. So what these are interesting is you can change the number. So I'll just drag in circular stick again. You can change the number of sticks you have here. You can change their offset, the bar length, which kind of looks like it's doing the same thing, but it's a little bit different. And then the bar width. So say if I have just a few here, more obvious what's happening. So the offset is pushing it up and down. And this length is actually changing the entire length of this thing. So if I move the offset now, you can see it's actually moving it up and down in space. And this one's actually changing the length. And if I change the number, and I change the width, it can do a lot of different things. So the way that I set this up is by default, it's going to come in as UV, which that's not very helpful. Projections are your friend, and you can do all kinds of really cool things with them. I'm always experimenting with different ways to use these projections. So you can fill by match per UV tile, which that's going to do. If you have a bunch of UV tiles, it's going to try to stamp them properly. UV projection will just be per tile projection. You need to use this if you have a map that you've already painted in another package that is using a Udemy workflow. That's what you would do here. You would use match per UV tile, so they would put it in the right place. What UV projection is going to do is it's going to tile this exact thing on every single tile. This is for like if you're using a 0-1 space texture like I am here, this gray circular stick is doing. You could use triplanar, which kind of is giving us what we want, but it's not what we want. Because what this is doing is it's going to do an XYZ projection, and there's going to be some bleed on the model a little bit. So that's not what I used. I used a planar projection, which is going to just project flat onto that object. Straight on here. So it's projecting in this direction. Bam. And it's actually projecting in this little cube here. So if I move the cube outside of its range, actually, well, because I have UV wrap on right now, I usually turn this off because when I'm doing these projections, I tend to only want to be projecting it in one little chunk here. So for this, let me go under. So right now in the UV transforms, nothing's changed because we did everything in 3D transform because we're doing a planar projection. So I'm just going to zero this out. These kind of look like they're doing the same thing, but it's actually, it's different because right here under UV projection, when I'm doing an offset, I'm offsetting that texture within that box where that projection is. What I tend to do is I want to leave my UV transforms alone. Whoops, offset it by 1. And I just want to do my 3D transforms. That way it's way easier to see what's happening. That way you can see where your bounding box is and you can push it around in the direction you need. It's better in my opinion. Whoops, I just hit tab. Tip, if you hit tab, full screen mode. Awesome. Rotation, rotates by X, rotates by Y, rotates by Z, however you need. Scaling, this is a 3D projection scale. I tend to use the UV scale in this instance. So we're just gonna leave it at 0. And let's go back to what we actually want to do. So I wanted to add these little ridges that go across this here. So I'm going to turn back on my mask, which is masking out this little outer ring area. I have a little mistake here. Hey, little mistakes never hurt because they, adds a little variability. Awesome. Okay, we're going to this inner pattern here. So first thing I did, blurred it, did some levels. Let's see what the difference is. I think I just inverted it. I don't remember why I did that, but hey, whatever. Then I added in sharpness. Sometimes I'm doing stuff and it doesn't even do anything. Don't judge me. Because a lot of times when I'm building this stuff, it's kind of in a flow state. I'm just kind of like working and then I'm just like, okay, it looks good. And I'll make something and I'm like, okay, good. So, maybe it's good to like go back and figure out what you were actually doing. Okay, so for this warp, what I did is I wanted to just warp it a little bit. So how you can control this thing, by default, it's going to give you a noise and it's going to give you an intensity for that noise. So if I turn off the blur amount, you can see as I dial up this intensity, and I have the blur at 0, it's just going to get real chunky. As an intensity divider, so what this is, it'll be 1/1000th of power, 1/100th, 1/10th, or absolute 1 to 0 intensity. I almost always start at 1000 because it just decreases the strength of the slider by 1/1000th. And then I will start pulling the blur up. So what that does is it blurs that noise that's being, that's driving the warping of the texture space, so that I can just get a little bit of a wobble. Because if I want to just push the texture around a little bit, just undulate, this will be the first step, would just be kind of a blurred version and intensity of like a 1/1000th. And then if I wanted to chip at the edges of it a little bit, you could either add another warp or you could do a slope blur. So do a little slope blur here. Same idea. You're gonna have the intensity here. You can do blur min, blur or max. Then you can increase the blur here, however you want to do it. Change the source tiling, get this intensity divider down. Okay, so then we have this inner pattern mask, and I'm just pulling that mask right here and pushing it up the chain so I can use it for something else. Now you just do that by going add anchor point, name that anchor point properly, or it'll get really, really confusing later. And all I'm doing for this is height for now. So it's just this right here. All right, so grunge nest. So what I'm doing here, let's take a look. I'll turn it off for now. It's a similar idea what I was doing inside here, using that grunge. Pushing around the values a bit. Yeah, it looks like I just copied and pasted the same grunge I was using from down there. I'm just going to do that because we did some changes. We'll just go with that. Turn that nesting off. So the first thing is this first fill is using that inner pattern mask that we just made earlier. Blurred a little bit. Just taking those min and max values down a bit. Just making it spill over the edges a little bit. And the white value is increasing or decreasing the overall value. And it's clouds, just cutting it out, multiplying. Looks good. For pattern 3, it was basically the same thing, except I did it for the back of the handle, which is that same pattern. Rough edges. Let's see what that is. All this is just a roughness value. So I just increased the roughness value. And then I did an HSL mask there. Make sure when you're using the HSL, be on the base color layer. Make sure to set it to pass through or it'll do nothing. And I just darkened it. So it's going to make the edges rougher and darker. And then I went in and hand painted one of those layers right here. Painted some spots in because I was just using a curvature. Then painted some spots in. Boom. Okay, so now I wanted to add some nicks and little cuts in there. So I turn this layer on. Let's start by turning the mask off. Turn this HSL. Let's see what this is doing. I'm making it shinier because when you cut into metal, like old metal, the scratches inside will be really, really sharp dings because they are inaccessible from people touching them. And I turn on the height and then I just took it down a little bit so that whenever, all right, this is, I'm just using a little scratch generator. Actually, I like the bigger, redrive this guy a little bit. Turn down the balance. See there's little scratches there. Turn up the contrast. And then I duplicated this on top as like a micro scratches. But this is still way too many. So I'm going to take this down a little bit, kind of redoing some of my old work. You also got to take into account how much this is going to be seen. So always taking that into account, like how much noodling something versus how much impact it has. That's always important to consider. All right, so now we see the scratches there. This was just, I wanted to add more sharp highlights. And did I add anything else? No, this is just roughness only. So maybe like dirt or smudges just to add variability. If we look in the roughness value, you can see if I turn this on and off, it's just going to be a bit shinier in these little areas here. Then this last one is a fingerprints layer. If I turn off that mask entirely, I just increase the roughness to 1 because it's like oily fingers. So I just wanted some variance in the, what I wanted is I just wanted variability in the surface detail. So if I turn that back on, we look at it. I just took a fingerprints brush. I just went to brush, fingerprint, use this brush, scaled it up, did this thing. In this case, I would have to turn on Windows Ink, turn that on because I want to be able to use flow variation. One thing is I'm going to turn down, let's go into the settings here. I'm going to turn off size jitter. I don't want size jitter. And let's turn off position jitter. So it'll always be in that area. And we can turn up angle jitter. That's okay. And then for flow jitter, I'm going to turn that off too, because I want to be able to drive that by my flow pen pressure here. You can see that I'm like that, just to add it in some there. And then I'm just kind of knocking some out. Very subtle, only in roughness. You can see a little glancing angle there, and you can see it in height just a little bit, or in roughness. I probably wouldn't do it in height. Maybe we could try to do it a little bit. That's a little weird though. It would be, if there was any, it would be so incredibly subtle. Sweet. So let's export this. So I'll go up to File, Export Textures. I have it in this folder here. I'm going to use Unreal Engine 4 Packed, and then we'll go over what that is. Using TGA, 8-bit, 4K, padding, dilation infinite. This has to do with how much bleed there is over the texture islands. I'm not really sure what the other use cases for this is. I just use it by default. So if you go into the output settings for this, so we'll go to which one that is, the Unreal Engine 4 Packed. You can see, so we have our base color here. This first one. It's going to name it by mesh, texture set. Some of the stuff I don't actually want. Let's take a look at what this one is. Packed from cache. Yeah, I'd originally changed the names of this stuff. I don't know why I didn't save it. Oh well, since it didn't save it, well, let's make a new one. So I'm just going to duplicate this base one. Okay, so I made a copy of this. Unreal Engine 4 Packed Custom. I'm going to go in here. I'm going to turn off the color space thing. Don't really need that. We're just going to do mesh name. What little dollar signs mean. If you go to the dollar sign thing here, $ project, mesh, texture set, UDIM, color space. What that does is it'll grab the project name and use that in place of this, or it'll grab the mesh name, texture set, the UDIM number, or the color space. So you can put that in the file depending on how you want to have it set up. So I'm just going to have it named what the mesh name is, which like doorknob, can't remember exactly what it was. So I'm just going to use mesh name underscore base color. Then in these, what is this, parenthesis? I think that's what it's called. Then it'll be dot, then the UDIM. So 1001. There's only one UDIM in here, but just as a rule, I just always have that included. So mesh base color. So let's turn off color space. I already know what that is. So this one's a special one. So I think this is called an ORM map, occlusion, roughness, metallic. And what that means, it's going to stack the occlusion, roughness, and metallic into the red, green, and blue channel of a single map. This reduces the file size of the entire material and the textures, which is very advantageous for games. So it's something we should be doing in film. Actually, we don't do that enough, because you can, if you have a grayscale map, you can stuff that into any channel you want, which can be really useful to like reduce file size, and just, it's cleaner. You can just import one map that does many different things. Let's switch these from PNG to TGA. I just like TGA better. I'm pretty sure TGA has like higher fidelity. Not sure that's true or not. Pretty sure it is. Look it up. Okay, so how you can tell this is occlusion roughness. So let's follow this green color R, which is here, mixed AO, which is the ambient occlusion. So that mixed AO is going to that channel. So you can just drag that in there, grayscale, to this red channel. Green channel is roughness. These are already hooked up. Blue channel is the metalness. So those three channels will be, or those three maps will be in these three channels in this one map. Awesome. And for normal DirectX right there. Emissive, we're not using emissive for this one, but we'll just leave it there. Then we go back over to our global settings and we see output template. We'll go over to that. Unreal Engine 4 Pack Custom. So if we click on standard surface material, we need to go back and rename these. That one's okay. Let's get rid of this color space and texture set just to make the file size smaller. It wouldn't actually affect anything, except it just would make it annoyingly long. And instead of metallic, occlusion, roughness, metallic, we're just going to call this ORM, way shorter. And we'll just remember occlusion, roughness, metallic, or metalness, whatever. There we go. Base color, ORM, normal, and emissive. We're going to turn off emissive because there was no emissive on this one at all. TGA 8-bit, perfect. The color space of the ORM and the normal map are both raw. So we need to remember that when we bring it into Unreal, so that we can uncheck sRGB for any raw files, because those are data files, not sRGB. Thanks so much for watching, guys. If you like this one, watch this video right here. That'll show you the process for how we got started from step 1 all the way to here. And I'll see you in the next one.